Mudlum, Polish Boys. Translated from Estonian by Charley, edited by Robyn Kristin later. The dedication of Adam Mackiewicz. The house in which Adam lived had already been marked for demolition years ago, but was still standing for some reason. It was a nice wooden building, kept with lots of little spires and full of attic rooms with slanted ceilings and strange hallways. Only a part of the bottom floor was inhabited. The few tenants stored their unused junk in the floors above, where there was the danger that a person might fall through, and since you could climb up onto the roof through the window, springtime marked the move of half their lives out into the open air. In fact, the whole district was rot fit only for a bulldozer. It was home to mostly a younger set with an intense desire for independence. Not even the electricity, which cut constantly, the dampness, the cold, or the roaches could scare them away. Not as long as they could bring boys or girls back home, drink wine, and smoke the rooms blue. Adam was squatting on the floor and swaying on his heels. In front of him was a clunky black typewriter, and strewn around that was a countless bunch of dirty coffee cups. The leftover grounds at the bottom either grew fur or became so hardened that one might have to hew them off with an axe. Everywhere were saucers, mugs, and glass jars full of cigarette butts. Adam occasionally sorted through this butt trove and rolled new smokes from it. At the same time, a confused pattern of hundreds of socks, shirts, jackets, pants, books, papers, pens, half-eaten meat or vegetable pies, empty bottles and ash speckled the floor in the literal sense of the word. Of course, all this rubbish was also partly for warmth. Though there was a bed in the bedroom, Adam preferred to sleep under a mess of blankets on a dingy cotton wool mattress on the floor. If for some reason he had to get up, as when visitors came, and he had to open the door, he would wrap one of these blankets around himself like a toga. He went about his day wrapped in such cocoons, long, slow, dreamy days of busying. With a blanket held under his armpit, he was standing now in the kitchen, slowly and methodically rinsing a dirty coffee cup under the faucet, for when Adam took something up, he did it thoroughly. With only ice-cold water and his bony fingers, he never used a rag. He rubbed away the coffee residue for a good 10 minutes. The countertop around the sink was grimy all over, with stacks of unwashed dishes and powder drain cleaner, detergent, sugar packets, and tea bags all ear to ear. There were shaving things in his toothbrush cup. On the floor, itself warped and water damaged, were strewn pots, pans, potatoes, and other crap. In addition, a legless sofa had at some point been shoehorned into the narrow kitchen. It was a place for people to spend the night and to study the animals before they fell asleep. Little bustling mice scurried up out of the cabinet under the sink and rustled happily about between the plates and the packets of flour. They had a pleasant life there. Adam Mackiewicz needed no comfort to live. He needed no furniture, no tables, chairs, wardrobes or shelves. His surface was the floor. That was where he lived and worked. To succeed at that, all he really needed was coffee, cigarettes, and other people. He needed people so much that he had earned the title Adam the Philanthropist. Despite its immeasurable chaos, his home was consistently filled with every kind of person, comrades with whom he discussed politics or philosophy, big-eyed, crestfallen girls awaiting his advice and guidance on questions of the heart, important statesmen, less important businessmen. They knocked, all of them, at Adam's door, and they all equally admired the services of his slow but thorough skull. When for some reason people had not come to Adam's door for a few days, he became morose, squatted in front of his pot of cigarette butts, fished one out after another, and every half hour or so made a big new pot of coffee with a heap of sugar. It is this sugar that probably kept him alive. He didn't drag on old cigarette butts because he couldn't afford new packs, but because he couldn't manage to twist himself out of his blanket and put on any people's clothes. It was the simplest thing in the world to drive Adam into a state of extreme motionlessness. You simply had to leave him alone. Slow enough as it was, his activity ground almost to a complete halt. Without ideas, people, necessity, obligations, pleas, Adam did nothing. He wouldn't lift a finger for his own sake, but he might well haul himself out of the house for the worries of others, neither sleeping nor eating for weeks at a time. It made no difference to him if the matter was a trifle or of historic, revolutionary, extraordinary import. When Adam had his people around him, he became entirely alive and industrious, and his face even shined slightly. His devotion to the pains of others was genuine and unconquerable. But Pan Mackiewicz had not always lived as Poland's Diogenes in a blanket. Years ago, the young Adam was known about town as a style icon like none other in the country. He drank wildly and incorrigibly, and with fateful consequence. He was always sleeping in the park under his cape, falling on his head from high places, or beating up his best friends. It was common enough for that top-of-the-world done-up Adam, in a black tailcoat with a white scarf hanging from a bow at his neck, a blue boutonniere on his lapel, and a little brown suitcase in his hand, to open that same suitcase in a crowded city square and take from it a bottle of palinka, sit back down on the case, and start methodically guzzling. In less than half an hour, the last sparks of reason would fade from his gentle, intelligent face. Deep inside his brain, angry green narrow stripes of light shone like the eyes of a predator. Wet with a drunkard's sweat, the sharp features of his face became foggy and sank away in every direction. He produced no articulate speech, but instead brawled with everybody. And although the pinnacle of both his fashion and his drinking are now years past, they deserve mention, because they were what made Adam the man he is today. Namely, he hasn't had a drop in quite some time, and just sits sadly in the corner at parties, looking longingly at girls before soon getting up to leave in a huff. It's nearly impossible to have a social life if you are unlike others. Sober Adam was too smart, and drunk Adam was too dumb, and there really was no remedy for that. We should start by mentioning a strange, olive-green trench coat kind of garment which was actually quite a normal coat. As Adam sewed and embroidered all kinds of things onto it, this unremarkable overcoat transformed into a strange trophy, and was something like Adam's first artistic smash. In the way of the decorated guns of Native American warriors, where there was a handmade patch of stripe for perhaps every life event. Over the top draped an enormous fire-red shawl of an artificial material covered in lint balls, a kind of white cape or scarf. In a word, Adam looked like a cowboy lost in the city. Later, this relic of a coat came into the possession of Adam's friend Arkadiusz Rusnak, alias Rekavica, in whose passport read a third, entirely different name. No one knows what has happened to this shawl. Much later, the old beloved thing came up in conversation, prompting Adam to ask, where the fuck is that old green coat? Nobody knew, but word went round, and the object was discovered in the studio of an artist friend's mother, who had recognized the item's symbolic value and not dumped it off at a thrift shop. It's probably still in her collection. Future generations can put it in a glass case in a cultural heritage museum. It is also worth mentioning Lilita's sewn floor-length cloche cape with a pelerine of the same army green as the coat. The cape was bigger than an army tent and slept 5 underneath. It was never washed, to say nothing of ironed. Folded as artfully as you wanted, it formed a small grey hill from its own dimension and was, for the most part, in a heap in a corner. It reeked of tobacco, dampness, and something unidentifiable. To go with the cape were lots of different checkered pattern jackets that had been mended 1,000 times, as well as a dilapidated hat. This is to say that Pan Mackiewicz liked needlework because it demanded time and patience. He could spend entire days mending his trousers and adding fashionably embroidered patches to the knees and under the groin. He sewed his own socks, underarm patches, torn jacket linings and pockets. No one in the world ever saw him in an unpatched piece of clothing. It is hard to imagine where one could come by things that were already falling apart, or how they got tattered so quickly. None of them held together. There are actually people who wear the same coat or suit for decades without even losing a front button, although perhaps their sleeves start to fade softly from wear. Corduroy jackets, velvet jackets, silk scarves, cravats, leather pants for 3 months running. Dye blonde hairdo a la David Bowie, or a curly mess dyed black with the kind of sludge you can get near Centralna station. These days Adam has gotten a bit boring. He now mostly wears very wide pants over his bony thighs and unironed button-up shirts with scrolling little patterns. Maybe a jacket on a good day, or a tailcoat at a party. Army boots. Shoes with humongous block heels. Or then shoes out of the 60s with ribbons and sharp noses. In summer and winter an undershirt, old but good. Of those he had every color, black, blue, brown, red, green, white. Even in his passport photo he's wearing a brown undershirt. And of course, his torso was brought stylishly out sometimes, a la Clint Eastwood. A heavy cotton overcoat for the cold, and an officer's coat for the absolute depths of winter. A now very worn quilt-patterned chamois leather jacket with many pockets. Embroidered berets. When he walks, It looks as though he is pulling along his hunched upper half with the help of long, shambling limbs. He has a big stout head at the end of this body. His brow is full of bumps and bulges. There is always a nasty pimple on one of his temples from hard thinking, and he keeps his jaw clamped angrily shut. But when he opens his mouth, he can fit in 2 fists or the whole head of a cat. Adam has a terrible liking for cats. He looks them straight in the eye and bumps them with his head, one animal to another. It's hard to believe, but this extravagant drifter was born into a family of clergymen and should have gone to seminary rather than loaf. Adam wanted no part in higher education. His belief in state institutions was shattered as early as primary school. "I'm not sure I've ever seen such a stupid person before," was how he at 7 described his first teacher. Had the times been different, Adam might well have offered his pastoral care at some established congregation, but he recognized no confessional in communo-Catholic Poland. His own gospel was more humane than any other creed now known. His father Jakub, a man with a long black beard, worked in the diocesan chancery as an advisor. He wrote letters to bishops and cardinals all over the world. Adam's mother was a quiet woman with a white face and sleepy eyes who quarreled with absolutely nobody. Even in the direst straits or with the worst toothaches, she remained mute. She crafted endlessly. She embroidered carpets, doilies, fine kitchen towels, crocheted and sewed. Her knitting needles clattered all the time. Her diligent hands and her style had filled the whole house, which was a place of tall ceilings and large rooms furnished sparsely with large, coal-black furniture pieces. These seemed fit to the proportions of a larger species of person that had now gone extinct. Among them modern people seemed small and lost. A photographer had set little Adam in a chair that looked like it had been made for a pharaoh. Made of oak and covered in leather, it weighed half a ton, and it took very strong men to move it from place to place. In the picture, Adam has a slightly doubtful expression. He's wearing short trousers with suspenders and crocheted, tufted wool socks, and his little hand barely reaches the armrest, which has a majestic, rolled design. The bookshelves behind him are filled with thick jackets, golden titles, and the smell of decades of dust, which is palpable on these unopened tomes, even through the picture alone. Adam's mother kept this photo, framed in gold, on the wardrobe in her bedroom. Photos are quite clearly something from the devil, because how else could a piece of life be imprisoned so motionlessly behind dusty glass? Even amid this Spartan, orderly life, the wrath of God still stalked them. An unknown disease gnawed the flesh of the older Pan Mackiewicz. He was covered all over with oozing blisters that broke out again and again in new places. They itched and exuded a clear fluid, which meant that at home he could walk around only in a wide white nightshirt that hung down to the floor. They wasted money on every kind of doctor, and Pani Eva covered him in ever more expensive balms and salves, but there were no signs of improvement. Eventually, this awful affliction was cured by a mixture of boric acid and talc recommended by an older Jewish man who had gotten it from a quack. Adam remembers clearly how his father sat in a chair, his black beard jutting forward, while his mother pressed his broken skin with all kinds of different goop. And although the face of Pani Mackiewicz betrayed absolutely no emotion, she clearly shook from revulsion. She shook so much that outside, leaves dropped from their branches and boom! In a single moment the trees were bare, and there was a yellow rug on the ground. Or at least Adam believed that the leaves had fallen because of his mother's shaking. But barely had one disease abated when another took its place. He had a bout of oedema, and then gallstones, and all Pani Mackiewicz could do was run around with hot cloths, medicine bottles and thermometers. Even the world's most beautifully embroidered doilies couldn't save them. Bad air reigned over the house.